Paul, thank you very much for joining us in Closing Bell. Of course, we're two women, so this is good news. But of course, it seems that overall representation sitting still below international standards, but it has ticked up 8% overall for executives in key positions, females in key positions. Yeah,
that's certainly right. What we've seen is that the increase has moved from 4% to 8% in exec positions. What we do find is that the percentage-wise, from a non-exec perspective, has settled around 13%, well, in the last year. And overall, we're seeing about a 15.8% based on the numbers across the board.
Paul, what's been clear from the numbers is that it's the government sector that's made a great deal of improvement in this area, employing women in top levels, where the private sector has lagged. What do you think explains those differences?
I think a lot of it has to do with the will to move women up through the ranks. I think that there are, generally speaking, well-documented reasons as to the glass ceilings that women are finding throughout organizations. And a lot of it has to do with the will to make those changes and to make corporate environments more women-friendly.
There have been certain sectors, if you do look at the private sector, where we've seen, real increases in the number of women in executive roles. Just take us through where we've seen major improvements.
So really the two key sectors that we've seen, interestingly, from an exec perspective, has been the industrial sector as well as the services. And there we've seen the numbers move up to 8-9% from low levels around 2-3%. So certainly those are the two main sectors that we've seen moving in the right direction.
So by implication, mining resources not doing well?
Well, certainly not as well as the industrials and the services sector.
But of course, traditionally male-dominated sectors. I mean, we had that report in one of the newspapers recently where you had Cynthia Carroll, Merwe Ramos, and of course Nonkululeko Nyembezi-Heta, three key CEOs in South Africa with big companies that they're trying to manage. And the fact that they were women was cited as perhaps a reason, they're under pressure right now. I mean, that would surely be seen as discrimination. You could have chosen 3 platinum companies with CEOs that were males that were facing as much pressure.
I think that all the organizations are under pressure at the moment, irrespective of whether you're a male or female. I think that, from that perspective, everybody needs to be treated equally. And I think that, where you do have that sort of discrimination around performance, that really speaks to some of those glass ceilings that are in place.
Well, let's talk about that. Do we have evidence that there is discrimination, that these glass ceilings do exist, or is it simply that women aren't entering into the workplace in the same numbers or don't have the length of years of experience to move to the top?
Well, I think that really some of the key issues are that in terms of the ratio of male to female are entering the workforce in certainly the same ratio. The question is as to how quickly and how easily it is for the women to move up through the ranks. I think that some of the issues are around the issue of maternity. Women do, in many instances, take those career breaks to have children, and certainly those are aspects that are not constraining men in their roles. So you definitely have career breaks, which then start to play into it. But then it really starts speaking back to how progressive are the companies that they work for as to how they deal with it.
Let's put this into a global context. Just looking at the UK market, Lord Davies had that Women on Boards report, and that set a minimum of 25% target for FTSE 100 companies in terms of female representation by 2015. And of course, this has had a major impact in terms of the number of female executives. Just tell us around, is that type of law, is that type of legislation, 25% target, appropriate for South Africa?
Well, certainly the regulation is not in place at the moment, not within South Africa. But in terms of the international trends, we are seeing a move towards a firm commitment, and that commitment is obviously then regulated. Where we see it happening, and certainly the companies that have made good progress are the Scandinavian countries. We've seen the Norway moving up to 40% female representation on boards.
And that's regulated? That's by
regulated.
Law. Yeah.
We're seeing the other Scandinavian countries, Sweden and Norway, around 27 and 24%. So certainly there has been movement in the right direction. I think what's interesting is that the EU Green Paper on Corporate Governance has explored the issue of whether it should be regulated or not. And the overwhelming response from the different countries is that they do have a commitment to taking those steps going forward, but certainly they want to do it on their own terms.
Paul, why should we care? Beyond the whole issue, the principle of representation, do women in the boardroom, do they ensure better financial performance of the company?
Well, there are pieces of research to suggest that there is better financial performance, and Credit Suisse have just recently released some interesting research in that regard. But really the thinking is around diversity of thought. It's around a more inclusive approach to business and clearer thinking from a leadership perspective.
Paul, thank you. That was Paul Shaw, Rewards Team Manager at PwC.